Hi, everybody. Welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. My name is Jared. This is episode 7 of my New Jerusalem playlist. And in this episode, we're going to talk about the layout and the original plan for New Jerusalem. This is the first version, and then in the next video, we'll talk about the revision that was made. But there's a lot of details to cover in this video. Keep in mind, this is part of a series that I'm doing. It's part of a playlist. And so we've already covered a lot of the misconceptions and misunderstandings when it comes to New Jerusalem, such as the definition of New Jerusalem in Zion, where the saints are going to be at the time that Christ comes, which will be in the Rocky Mountains, meaning the headquarters of the church. Misconceptions about the Kansas City area having to be destroyed in order for New Jerusalem to be built. The misconception about the entire church being gathered at Jackson County, which you're going to see that was not part of the original plan as we go through the details here. The idea or explaining what it means that there would be peace, refuge, safety, and the terror of the Lord in New Jerusalem. And then also we covered the misconception that Salt Lake City is now the New Jerusalem, and now that's going to be the center place, which is not the case. So we're going to be looking at the Joseph Smith papers. And specifically, we're going to read this right here, historical introduction. Now, there's the original explanation. You see this writing that goes around the depiction of the city. All of that is transcribed and placed right here. And probably an easier way to read this, like a clearer way, is if you go to the Millennial Star. I'll put the link for this in the description below. This is on page 438. And it starts right here. An explanation of the plot of the city of Zion sent to the brethren in Zion, the 25th of June, 1833. So you can read that if you want to. I've chosen not to do that because the historical introduction covers all the same information and gives the context. And it gives you a much clearer picture of what we're looking at here. Okay, so we'll just go ahead and read it. Plat of the city of Zion, circa early June to the 25th of June, 1833. By the summer of 1831, Joseph Smith and other leaders in the Church of Christ believed that Zion, which was designated to be built in Jackson County, Missouri, would become a central gathering place and the archetype for a city of holiness, where all believers would live together in righteousness. By mid-1833, church leaders in Missouri had acquired a large amount of land in Jackson County, where, according to one estimate, more than 1,200 church members lived. Meanwhile, in Ohio, church leaders made plans to obtain funds and materials to build a house of the Lord, or temple, in Kirtland. However, little headway was made until the 1st of June, 1833 little headway was made until 1st of June, 1833 revelation chastened leaders for their lack of progress, which encouraged them to begin constructing the house. Perhaps being influenced by their plans to develop Kirtland as a town and a gathering place, the presidency of the high priesthood likewise began contemplating the growth in the gathering to Missouri, and as a result, created the Plat featured here and its accompanying explanation. They then sent the Plat to Missouri church leaders with a letter and an architectural plan for the house of the Lord to be built in Zion. And we have that right here. We've talked about this before, but essentially this temple would look almost identical to the Kirtland Temple. If you're familiar with the Kirtland Temple and how the windows and doors are laid out, then you would recognize that this looks just like the Kirtland Temple. On page 1, it has the floor plan, and you have the you have the different podiums for the different offices of the priesthood. So very much like, if not identical to the Kirtland Temple. All right, back to this. The letter that accompanied this plat indicates that the entire presidency was involved in creating it, though the drawing of the plat and its explanation are in the hand of Frederick G. Williams. The plat of the city of Zion featured here represents the first detailed master plan for city development by the church's presidency. The plat is drawn with the east-oriented side at the top. Now, the Joseph Smith papers thankfully allow you to rotate the document, and so I have it to where north is right here, okay, and then east is over here. So I have it oriented correctly. So this is what it would look like. You'd have one block of temples right here, 12 temples, and then to the south, you'd have the next block of temples. Okay. It displays, let me zoom out. It displays a 1 square mile grid. Okay, this is 1 square mile. It displays a 1 square mile grid with 49 city blocks and 132 foot wide straight streets crossing at right angles. The square mile grid pattern adhered to guidelines set out in the Federal Land Ordinance of 1785. Okay, so this complied with and was made in accordance with the Federal Land Ordinance of 1785. So it's not all strictly on Revelation, although most of what you have here is as a result of Revelation, just not that part. It was common in urban planning during this period of American history. The plat and the explanation written in the margins surrounding it, however, called for some distinctive elements. For instance, the plat featured fewer blocks than would have been normal for a square mile section of a township. The explanation also called for 10-acre city blocks containing lots that, at half an acre each, were larger than usual. Okay, so say that you lived on this city block. This block would be 10 acres, and so you had this lot right here. Your lot would be half an acre. And compared to other cities at the time, you would have more land for your lot. And I guess not as many people living, or at least properties, within this square mile. The explanation also called for a central row of blocks to contain 15 acres each. As drawn, however, the plat has a middle row of 7 blocks that contain 16 acres each. And this is referring to this middle row right here. You can see that the majority of the blocks are square and they have 10 acres each, whereas these ones in the middle, according to this, like I said, those were, I guess in theory, they would contain 15 acres each, but as shown, it was actually 16 acres each, I guess the way it was drawn. But whatever the case, these are the blocks 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. These ones would be larger. Okay. 46 of the blocks on the plat were designated as residential areas, and the 3 central blocks were intended for storehouses and temples. And you can see the spots for the 24 temples, and then you have a block up here that doesn't have anything in it. Let's continue. The residential blocks featured an unusual arrangement of individual lots. Each half-acre lot was to contain 1 house, generally positioned on each block so as not to face the house across the street. Yeah, so you see how it's like alternating right here. So if you were in this one, your house would be like right here, facing the side of this person's property. The instructions stated that each house should be set back 25 feet from the street and be made of brick and stone. The explanation also indicated that the city was intended to accommodate 15 to 20,000 people. And that's key. That's key because that's the plan for New Jerusalem. It's not this gigantic, like mega city or metropolis. Now, I don't know how things are going to be in the millennium, and I'm assuming that this is still the plan. I have reason to believe that. We'll cover that in other videos. But, obviously, you would, so it's going to say it here, but essentially once this city was complete, then what you would do is start another city after the same pattern. And then it would just go like that until it covers the entire earth. So undoubtedly across the surface of the earth, you'd probably have some areas that are more populated than others, but it would be according to this pattern. And it doesn't seem, unless we receive further revelation or however things are supposed to go, that you would have the type of thing like cities like we have right now, where like with large metropolises, you have the city center that has tall buildings and skyscrapers and stuff like that. It doesn't seem like that's how it's going to be in the millennium, but we can only assume that or guess that based on this plan. All right, continuing. However, the Plat features only 976 residential lots, which means that more than 15 individuals would have needed to live in each house in order to accommodate a minimum of 15,000 people. When the city reached the population limit, according to the explanation, another city would be established after this same pattern. The Plat and its explanation depict an urban agrarian center designed for equitable distribution of property, community cohesion, and convenient access to schoolhouses, places for congregational worship, and nearby agricultural land that was to support the urban population. The explanation of the Plat indicated that all individuals living in the city of Zion were to reside in the urban center, even if they worked on a farm. So this is really interesting. This is, and I don't know, sometimes like we think that we know better, or we have our preferences of how we want to live our life, how things should be. But it would be really interesting to see this put into practice, because maybe this is the most ideal way of living. As far as I know, there isn't anywhere in the world that has actually lived in this kind of way according to this plan. So it'd be interesting to see that millennial world and see this in operation, and maybe it's far superior to how we do things right now. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Okay, so the presidency explained that all farms, grazing areas, and agricultural structures were to be built outside the city's perimeter, forming a hinterland and green belt. The Plat did not indicate where businesses were to be built, suggesting they might also be located outside of the city, or perhaps they were to be connected to residential lots or located on one of the central blocks within the storehouses. All right, so that's kind of a mystery. Where are businesses supposed to be? It's clear that farmland is supposed to be on the outside of the city. Businesses, not so clear. Either the outside of the city or off of your private residence on your own property, or possibly over here, but I would think definitely not where the temples are. But again, this is just the first version of this plan, so there's some changes made in the revision that we'll cover in the next video. Okay, but anyway, the three larger blocks in the center of the Plat contained a complex for 24 multi-purpose buildings, or houses of the Lord, which were to dominate the urban landscape. The presence of these buildings and the apparent exclusion of other types of buildings highlights the role of religion in the city. Though these houses or temples may have also been intended to serve as locations where people could perform the municipal functions of law and order, the names given in the explanation of the city Plat for these 24 buildings reflect the priesthood structure of the church. So, yeah, like we've said, these temples have names, and they're not like temples that we have right now. So you can read the names on in the explanation, like the original explanation on the back side of this paper. What I did, well, and there's a couple other places you can find it too. For example, you have it recorded here. Excuse me. You have it recorded here. Minute Book 1. And it says names of the temples of Zion, the 24th of June, 1833. The names of the temples to be built on the painted squares as represented on the plot of the city of Zion, which is now about to be forwarded thither. Numbers 10, 11, and 12 are to be called House of the Lord for the presidency of the high and most holy priesthood after the order of Melchizedek, which was after the order of the Son of God upon Mount Zion, city of the New Jerusalem. So it just rolls off the tongue, as you can see. What I did is I created a spreadsheet to kind of make it easier, and this is how it goes. So, excuse me. Now, the way I have it laid out here is according to the revised city plat, which we'll go over in the next video. But these are the names of the temples. And the two blocks, okay, the two groups of 12 correspond with the Aaronic priesthood in the east and then the Melchizedek priesthood in the west. So starting from the east, this first group right here, Numbers 24, 23, and 22, House of the Lord for the presidency of the high priesthood after the order of Aaron, a standard for the people. 21, 20, and 19, House of the Lord for the high priesthood after the order of Aaron, the law of the kingdom of heaven, messenger to the people. 18, 17, 16, House of the Lord for the teachers in Zion, messenger to the church. 15, 14, 13, House of the Lord for the deacons in Zion, helps in government. Okay, and now we start with the Melchizedek priesthood, corresponding temples, 12, 11, and 10. House of the Lord for the presidency of the high and most holy priesthood after the order of Melchizedek, which was after the order of the Son of God upon Mount Zion, city of the New Jerusalem. 9, 8, and 7, the sacred apostolic repository for the use of the bishop. 6, 5, and 4, the holy evangelical house for the high priesthood of the holy order of God. And then the last ones, 3, 2, and 1, the house of the Lord for the elders of Zion, an ensign to the nations. So you can see that there's like this kind of like correspondence between priesthood offices and these groups of three. So I pulled up, this is under the gospel principles. This is in the gospel principles manual, chapter 14, priesthood organization, where you can see the different offices of the priesthood. And it seems like more or less they kind of correspond like this. So when you're looking at the Aaronic priesthood ones, it's like, it doesn't say bishop, okay? It says House of the Lord for the presidency of the high priesthood after the order of Aaron. And we know that a bishop, okay, the bishop is the president of the Aaronic priesthood in his ward. A bishop also, like it says here, a bishop is also ordained a high priest so he can preside over all members of the ward. So it's like you have the first set for the office of bishop, the second for priests, maybe, even though it doesn't say priest in the name. And then the third set for teachers, which it does have teacher in the name. And then the fourth for deacons. And then for these last ones, it seems like this is maybe for the first presidency. I'm not sure. This one, it says the sacred apostolic repository. So I don't know, apostles, or maybe just like generally speaking, these two rows are supposed to be for the first presidency and the Quorum of the 12, and maybe other general authorities. 6, 5, and 8, the Holy Evangelical House, which that would correspond with Patriarch. Okay. So we've talked about apostles and 70s potentially together, not sure. And then Patriarch. And then the last 3, House of the Lord for the elders of Zion. And of course, elder is the first office that you receive, or that you're in the Melchizedek priesthood. So it's something like that. Okay. And the principal temple would be this one right here, number 11. And this is the first temple that would have been built. This is where you have the temple lot in Independence, Missouri. Okay. Right here. They own the lot for that first temple. And you can see the outline right here where it would be, like where the cornerstones were laid. Okay. But it's more than just that one lot. There are 24 of them total, 24 temples. Okay, back to this. So the names given in the explanation of the city plat for these 24 buildings reflect the priesthood structure of the church. Okay, so we just covered that. This sacred space was the city's focal point. Much of daily life was meant to revolve around these buildings, which would likely be used for church administration, ecclesiastical worship, and priesthood education. 2 years earlier, during a visit to Jackson County in summer of 1831, Joseph Smith and 7 other church leaders had assembled together where the temple is to be erected. Sidney Rigdon dedicated the ground for the city, and Joseph Smith laid a cornerstone for the contemplated temple on the 3rd of August, 1831. Rigdon then pronounced this spot of ground wholly dedicated to the Lord forever. The plat may have been designed with that spot of ground as its center. Along with this plat, an architectural plan for the first house of the Lord to be built in Zion accompanied the letter to church leaders in Jackson County. That plan also gave specifications, dimensions, and names for the 24 temples to be constructed in the city center. The Kirtland leaders wrote that they desired with all our hearts the prosperity of Zion and the peace of her inhabitants, for we have as great an interest in the welfare of Zion. For this reason, they sent the plat, explanations, and plans. They instructed that the temple identified on the plat by an X was to be built immediately in Zion for the presidency, as well as all purposes of religion and instruction, much like the multi-purpose structure then being built in Kirtland. So if you zoom in, you can see that temple. Here's the X right here. This is the first one that was supposed to be built. So I guess the way that it was originally arranged, I guess maybe this one would have been the primary temple. But again, there's a revision to this a few months later. We'll look at that in the next video. Underscoring the importance of the plans and explanations sent, Joseph Smith and the Kirtland leadership informed the recipients in Missouri that if they did not understand the explanations for the house or the plat, you will, quote, "You will inform us so as you may have a proper understanding, for it is meet that all things should be done according to the pattern," end quote. The body of text titled Explanation was written on all 4 margins surrounding the plat and is included in the following manuscript. The text begins at the top margin, the east-oriented side of the plat, continues on the bottom, and then proceeds on the right-hand margin before moving to the left-hand margin of the plat. The explanation concludes on the reverse side of the document by identifying the names of the 24 temples. Like I said earlier, Williams copied the names for the temples into Minute Book 1. That's what we were just looking at earlier, on the 24th of June, 1833, which suggests that At least that portion of the explanation on the plat had been created by that date, though additions may have been made before the draft was sent to Missouri 2 days later. Likely on the 25th of June, 1833, the day before the plat was mailed to Missouri, Frederick G. Williams copied the explanations of the plat into Joseph Smith Letter Book 1. John Whitmer acknowledged that this plat and the building plan for our Lord arrived in Jackson County on the 29th of July, 1833. Attempts to implement the plan of Zion would have necessitated major changes in existing roads, existing roads and structures, and undoubtedly caused significant political strife. And that remains the case today. You know, as you can see here, this is not an area that would easily conform to that plan. And I think this is why a lot of people think that, you know, the Kansas City area, or at least the East Kansas City area, has to be destroyed, leveled. And I'm not so sure that that's the case. I think that things can be done over time in an orderly way, and you can start little by little. And as things go along, you know, so for example, you could start, and it seems like we already have started the New Jerusalem with this temple right here, the Independence Visitor Center. I'll be doing some videos about that specifically later on, but just know for now that it was designed to be one of these 24 temples. And so there is a beginning. And so maybe the millennium will start. We'll have the beginnings of the New Jerusalem. And then over the course of time, as things change in the religious world and in the world, we'll be able to, in an orderly way, go ahead and construct New Jerusalem according to this plan. Okay, so the plot. Okay, we already heard that. Though this plat had not yet reached Jackson County, opponents of the church claimed to have heard church members, quote, declare openly that their God has given them this county of land, and that sooner or later they must and will have the possession of our lands for our inheritance, end quote. That does not sound like they had the proper... There's contention in that. Obviously, we know that the saints weren't able to build Zion in the first place because the church needed refinement, needed to be tried and perfected and tested and proven true. So they weren't allowed to build the New Jerusalem the first time. And maybe this is some of that attitude. Members declaring openly that their God has given them this country or this county of land, and that sooner or later they must and will have the possession of our lands for our inheritance. It doesn't sound like that's the right tone to take. Such sentiments angered many local residents and further motivated them to expel the Mormons. The plat of the city of Zion, had it been seen by the church's opponents, would have confirmed what they already believed about the Church of Christ's goals in the county. By the time this plat was received in Missouri, church members were already embroiled in a growing civil conflict with other residents of Jackson County, and therefore could not implement the plans. Based on letters from Missouri and noticeable defects in the plan, Frederick G. Williams, again on behalf of the presidency of the High Priesthood, drew a revised plat map for the city of Zion and sent it to Missouri about 2 months later. The images of the document shown here are oriented east up and was the original document. So, yeah, like I said, we'll cover the revised plan in the next video. But you'll notice a few things here. You don't have the lots numbered. There's no names given to the streets, which there are in the revised plan. And I think a few of the names are pretty interesting. And there's, it ends up being different, like similar, but different from what we have here. The temples are oriented differently, the size of the lots, the number of city blocks. So we'll go over that in the next video. All right, but that's going to be it for this one. So if you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it, leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also, make sure to share it, and I'll talk to you guys later.